Welcome to NDTR Spotlight, the corner of the internet where NDTR shine. I'm your host, Marie Lorraine. One of the greatest things about running this podcast is seeing the progression of the NDTRs that are featured on this podcast. You get to see them advance in their career in so many incredible ways, whether that's being more involved in the academy, finding a job that better fits their skills, them starting podcasts, being more vocal on social media, or advancing to the dietitian credential and doing more in the field of dietetics. And one of the things that I find very valuable about NDTRs who decide that they want to become a dietitian is they have a better perspective and understanding of the value of NDTRs. And so today we have Mark with us. He was on the podcast a few years ago as an NDTR, and he had very ambitious goals. He also was a physical therapist assistant, so he had a really interesting perspective of two different fields coming together and to better treat patients. And his goal was to become a dietitian. And I'm happy to say he has completed it and he's back on the podcast. And today we're going to just talk to him about the experience of transitioning from an NDTR to a dietitian, how the NDTR credential impacted him and how it continues to impact him in his career and what he's doing moving forward. Little tips on, or little insight on what he's doing before we chat with him. He actually is pursuing a master's degree in sports nutrition right now. He has a private practice called My Portion Nutrition, and he's just doing incredible things. Thank you so much for coming back to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Definitely feel honored to be back on your show. It's a true blessing to the fact that you have this spotlight where you can just really have people be on your show and just share their passions. And just kind of like you introduced, I am a former NDTR. I do still have the credential, but I'm also now a registered dietitian. And it's just been such an incredible journey, just reaching my lifelong dream of becoming a registered dietitian.
Yes, and you went about it in, I think, one of the best pathways, getting the NDTR credential first, but I'm obviously very biased to that. So walk us through having that NDTR credential during your dietetic internship, and even when you complete the internship, you're still not registered yet. So did having that credential impact you in any way during that time?
Absolutely, 100%. So it was all positive. So I would say the most beneficial thing of being an NDTR first was just the invaluable experience you have with treating patients and just responsibility. So a lot of the things that you do as an NDTR will carry forward and complement you well as a registered dietitian. So you just can't replace that patient care experience, and having that NDTR credential, working functioning as an NDTR, you definitely will be able to translate into a registered dietitian pretty smoothly.
Yes, that's great. So what are you doing now as a
So
dietitian?
yeah, that's a great question. One of the cool things is when I first landed a job is I was exposed to everything. So it was a really small hospital. They needed someone to step in an outpatient setting, with their long-term care setting, and then the acute care. So it was all connected. I thought that was really interesting. So you never actually leave the building. It's just all connected, and I got to function in all capacities. So great learning experience for sure. The only downside is being the only dietitian there. You don't really have anyone to mentor you, so you kind of learn along the way with the bumps and bruises. But that's kind of why I also worked alongside a different hospital just so I can have some mentorship and then just learn from others.
Nice. So was that the experience you did while you were an intern, or is that a job you had as a
Oh
dietitian?
yes, a job as a dietitian. But during my internship, I definitely tried to soak it up as much as I could. But just going back to the NDTR credential, um, a lot of the things, without disclosing information, just a lot of the things like the content that's on the NDTR exam, you'll also notice it's going to be on the RD exam too.
That's a huge, I think, advantage of doing both exams. I noticed that myself with, obviously we can't tell like questions or whatnot, but the topics that are on there, what did you find was beneficial in like the knowledge you had from the NDTR credential exam versus the RD exam? Like what did you take in?
Yeah, definitely. So I remember looking at the outline topics, like pretty much side to side just to compare them, just to see what I knew from the NDTR exam, and then how it would help me with the RD exam. And you just can't replace the basic food science, right? So you're just going to have that foundation, the food science, and then also medical nutrition therapy. Obviously, as an NDTR, you can't assess, you can't diagnose, but you're still involved in that screening and referral process. So you still have to know what's going on. And so, like kind of like we were talking about with the PT assistant and like bridging gaps, is as a PT assistant, you can't just walk into a treatment blindly. You have your supervising therapist who kind of leads and directs with the initial assessment, and then from there, as a PT assistant, you have that evaluation. You look at the plan of care, and then you can treat from there. Because so kind of similarly with the RD, they kind of supervise and direct. You work under as an NDTR, but it's a collaborative team effort. And so just going back to the exam, is you just cannot go in blindly with your medical nutrition therapy and your foundational food science background, and then of course some food service too. There's just some basic fundamental concepts that translate over with both jobs.
Yes. And I feel like you hit on two really, really important parts of the benefits of having both of the credentials. One was just the food service. I noticed too, when I took the RD exam, the amount of focus I had to have on food service for the NDTR exam really like made that part of the exam, like I was like, I got it. Like I already done this. I know the things, because the NDTR exam for me was a lot more heavier for food service. Did you have a similar kind of experience with that, or was that? I know they changed the way they test, but
Yeah, I would agree with you, Marie. I think that there was a lot of incorporation of food service questions, and we put a lot of emphasis on the clinical part. I think even now, the way that they rework the exam is it's even more accounted for. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I understand.
that it's more accounted for, or
For clinical, I think that they're trying to, or I think they already did rework it.
they did. Yeah, I think 2017, or one of our guests was on the committee for that. I forgot, I'm blanking on her name, but there was a revamping of the exams that happened recently. They do it every few years. So you're right with that. And I will say, I really like what you said about the assessment part of the NDTR. So typically, from talking with NDTRs, I find that the clinical aspect when they're in the hospital is not that in depth, just because hospitals don't seem to know how to utilize NDTRs well right now. But I love that you talked about that at foundational, just the assessment and the screening skills that come into play. Because on paper, it might seem simple, like look at weights, look at this. But if you get good at those assessment skills, you can really pull out like high risk patients that might not seem high risk. And so you have a better skill set for if you do advance to a dietitian and you want to do more heavy clinical work, you have really good foundational skills for just screening patients that you're going to see. Did you find that was helpful for you when you started working in the community hospital?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So obviously, again, as an NDTR, that helped a lot because you're already working with patients and you feel comfortable. So you're not just a dietetic intern; you also have a credential. That's pretty big. So patients, they want to make sure that you're comfortable working with them, but not just comfortable, that you're also competent. So going in with the NDTR credential and being a dietetic intern, it was just invaluable. Just saying that you're actually credentialed, because if you look at the RD and the NDTR, those are the two things that the academy credentials, the two things you can do in the field of dietetics, and so that speaks a lot to the profession. And so I had to do a lot of education. Honestly, a lot of people don't know what NDTR is, as you said. You don't really think that they're utilized at the best. I definitely tried to shed some light on what the credential was. But it definitely did me so much good just getting that credential first. I guess I just can't stress that enough. So whoever's interested in getting it, I would definitely say it was well worth the time.
Yes, I do have I'm curious to ask. So I know during a dietetic internship, when you're going to see a patient in a hospital setting, you're supposed to introduce yourself. And so in my internship, we were taught to say, I'm a intern. Did you ever introduce yourself as a diet technician and kind of like just make yourself feel like not a student?
Yeah, that is very tempting, but I learned like it's not always so, I guess, black and white, you know. So like what I mean to say is like the healthcare field, there's a lot of gray areas, and obviously you don't want to come across as you don't want to undersell yourself, you don't want to oversell yourself, in the sense that like sometimes you can just kind of tell when you can tell when you walk in a room and a patient is kind of anxious. You want to give them some assurance, like, oh, hey, by the way, don't worry, you know, I'm not just a dietetic intern. I'm also an NDTR. I have some experience here. So, I mean, you kind of have to play it by ear, and you have to look at, you know, that you have to just kind of look at each situation differently. So, if you know that someone's really comfortable and you don't have to reassure them, you can just be like, hey, I'm a dietetic intern. You don't have to mention other things there. I mean, do you kind of feel the same way?
I think that's great. I think that's so good. I think one of the hardest things about being a dietetic intern is just the confidence to feel like you know what you're doing. So, holding that credential as an NDTR and having experience walking into your internship gives you confidence. And then to be able to say, I'm an intern, but I have experience in this and be truthful about it, like don't over exaggerate, like you said, but say, like, well, yeah, I was a NDTR prior to my internship. I have this schooling. I understand what I'm talking about. I know that gives people so much more confidence when you come in. You can come in and say, like, I've seen this before and I can help you. Or like, I've done this education before. I was talking to somebody else about some diabetes education, right? Something that you probably could do as an NDTR and be able to just have that confidence that kind of eases your patients, or it increases your patient's trust in what you're saying. So that's a really good nugget for any dietetic intern who's an NDTR and just needs that, how to incorporate the NDTR maybe into some of your rotations, obviously in an ethical way, as you just described, Mark. That was a beautiful way of saying how you can kind of mention that little nugget of knowledge you have. Now as a dietitian, right? You're no longer necessarily an NDTR. I know you still hold the credential, but as a dietitian, how do you feel like you can continue to speak up for NDTRs, or just validate NDTRs, or incorporate NDTRs into what you're doing or how you might work in the future?
So I guess one of the nice things about having your own private practice is, you call the shots. You can incorporate whatever you want to. So eventually, down the line, no indefinite, timeline, but eventually, I would love to give an NDTR an opportunity. Just like the dietetic internship process is an opportunity. Not everyone is willing to precept you. If you have a coordinated program, you don't have to worry about that. But for me, I went through a distance internship, and it was really hard to secure preceptors. And so, as an NDTR, same thing. You have to secure preceptors, and then also you have to find a job. So eventually, down the line, when it's all said and done, I would love to open up that door for an NDTR. And so just advocacy within my own practice, but then also, out in the field, I know how it feels like to be an NDTR, and then also to look at other professions out there, whether it be physical therapy, occupational therapy, nursing, even physicians. They all have a team, right? So, like the physician's assistant, the nurse's assistant, physical therapist assistant, like myself, occupational therapy assistant. Just I know that the NDTR is not called an assistant, but if you look at what other fields are doing, they have someone who it's pretty recognizable what they do. The roles are clearly defined, and with us, people don't even know we exist. So I think just having that other credential, it really makes it easy to help people understand what an NDTR does. And so just having that, it's easier for me to explain what they do. So it's kind of an unfair advantage, but it definitely works in my favor.
Yes, and that's great to be able to have that mindset of just opening up. Because I know I was at Fincy this past year, and there is an NDTR who's doing a satellite they have to build their own preceptors. So for dietitians to be on the lookout too for NDTRs, I think that's going to also help students be more willing to do an NDTR program, because there's really not that many in the country. So if they can do online and build their own program, and dietitians are willing to, take them under their wing and show them what they know, I think that'd be really great for our profession. And so private practice, that's a pretty exciting thing. And I know it looks like you just launched it. I was looking at your website. I was looking you up a little bit, making sure you were legit again. And so how is that going? My Portion Nutrition, what is your mission with that? What is your goal with that? Just in your career as a dietitian now?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, my mission is, to serve others. And so just providing some background on me, I'm a born again Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and my Portion Nutrition. The background of that is I'm obviously as a dietitian. We talk a lot about portion control, and just having a good a diverse diet. But also, the Bible, it teaches us to, that we shall not live on bread alone, but every word that speaks from the mouth of God. And I wanted to have something that was symbolic of my walk with Christ, but also something that resonates with the field of dietetics. And so my Portion Nutrition, it was just, it was actually just, it just fit like a glove. And I can't take all the credit for that one. My wife definitely helped me with that name. But just it was a collaborative effort. But yeah, she has some background with the weight loss clinic with her mom, so she helped manage that. They had 3 weight loss clinics in Alabama, and just for me, I had a background also as a certified personal trainer, in addition to being NDTR, and I already knew what I wanted to do with the counseling, with incorporating, fitness training in there. So it was just really seamless. It's definitely a God thing. And I think that, over time, only time will tell what will happen. The Bible says, do not worry about tomorrow, for we don't know what tomorrow brings. So I don't know what the future holds with that, but it's definitely been exciting. And, I've definitely been able to bless so many people already. Some of the testimonials are on my website. I have a lot that I haven't even put up on there yet. But it's just amazing. Like some people who they don't even know, basic macronutrients. And so for those of you listening who don't know what macronutrients are, it's just the basic carbs, fats, and protein. And then there's other people. There's so much misinformation there on Google, or wherever on the internet, or sometimes even books, because just because something's in a book doesn't mean that it's actually factual. And you just need a publisher for that matter. But anywho, I just really want to help people and direct them along the right path.
Yeah, and I love that, the consistency, because I remember talking to you last time you were on here and you had that same like faith foundation, and it's nice to see how it's manifesting. And I feel like mixing the nutrition and the faith together is a beautiful niche that can really benefit a lot of people to be able to focus on both at the same time, because I feel like there's a spiritual element to eating that we sometimes miss out and we don't talk about. And so the fact that your program has that underlining foundation, and then you do talk about prayer. I was reading through your website, and that's mentioned on there. I do want to ask, it sounds like you have a lot of licensures, and you can do licensure in Mexico, Dakota, Virginia for your dietitian credential. What was your reasoning behind those states and getting those licenses as a LD, a licensed dietitian?
Great question. So for those of you listening, if you think that passing the RD exam is your last stop, you're actually not done. You have to actually, depending on the state, you have to get licensure. So, wherever you live, you're just going to have to get that state license if applicable. So a great example where it is not applicable is the state of California. Colorado is another one. And then you also have Virginia, and then Arizona. Those are the ones I know off the top of my head that don't require licensure. But the other states, I did my due diligence. I had to research the states where I felt like it would be not necessarily easy, but things that I could submit to in a timely manner and get credentialed in. And so I was able to get credentialed in those four states that you mentioned. And then also the reasoning why is, again, not only is it a requirement, but if you want to have job opportunities, then you kind of have to plan ahead. And so I work as a remote dietitian for one of my jobs, and you still have to, even though I don't live there, you still have to get credentialed in that state. So one of my accounts, they, wherever they need help, I just kind of fill in, and then I step into that role in that state. So I'm operating in my home state, but I'm working as an RD, just remotely, and so you still need to have licensure for that.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I feel like that's something that's kind of missed when you become a dietitian. And then, especially now, there's so many remote jobs. And so, knowing that you have to get that extra LD. And it's what was the process of applying for the licensures in different states? Was it complicated? Was it a test? What was the process for people who don't know?
Yeah, I'm not even gonna lie. Sometimes you just wish that you had like a mentor guiding you along the way,
Yes.
because when it comes to these licensure things, you can email them, but it doesn't always mean they'll be responsive. And you're not bashing anyone. It's just the way that it goes. Nature of the beast. There's so many people applying, that high volume, and sometimes you're just a number, a drop in the bucket. But you know, I will say that there are some states that do a little bit better job at getting back to people. So I'm never one to bash anyone, but it's just one of those things. Like I said, it's just how it works. But if they have time, of course, they'll get back to you as soon as possible. But inevitably, there are some states that do get back to you a little bit quicker, and that's always appreciated anywhere.
So, is it just paperwork or what is the process exactly? Or is it different for every state?
Yeah, it's a little different.
Okay.
So, like Illinois, for example, that is my home state. That's where I was born and raised in Illinois. Um, so I tried to get credentialed there. I'm in that process right now. It's not as easy as other states because even though they have information online, it's not like a truly 100% online application, and their application's a little bit more lengthy. Indiana, I'm also in that process. Pennsylvania, I'm also in that process. So there's a lot of states that I did get credentialed in, and then there's other ones that I'm still trying to, maneuver through, or maybe I could have it done already. But I do have quite a bit going on, and it's not, I think it's a mixture of how comprehensive other states are, and then some of them are also like time sensitive, and then it's just a lengthy process where you have to go in for additional things. I'm kind of being vague in what you have to do because it's just different for every state. So, like for example, yeah, like one state requires me to go in for like fingerprints, and some states don't. Some states want the background check and the fingerprints. So and then also if you have to redo it again, sometimes you have to redo something, paperwork or the fingerprints, and it's just one of those things. And then they have to process it. You know how it works, and then sometimes that those business days are truly business days, so they don't count weekends. So I mean, you have to look at what each state requires. So that's why I can't really speak from the top of my head because all the states are different.
That is, I didn't realize how different they were. I know for Missouri, it just you fill out a form and send a check in, and that's it. But I didn't realize the fingerprints. It sounds
Wow.
like sounds like it's a
Yeah.
lot to be. It's something to think about if you're wanting to pursue a dietitian credential and work remotely. It's something to put in the back of your mind. So thank you for that knowledge. That's definitely a nugget. I wanted to ask you too. So your certifications, you have a lot. You're a dietitian, physical therapist assistant, you're a personal trainer through ACE, a fitness nutrition specialist through ACE, a sports conditioning specialist through ACE, a US Box Silver level coach certificate, and then you're also certified an EKG technician. So, what are the benefits of all of these credentials and just the ability to keep them maintained?
Wonderful question. So this is kind of like I mean, it's something that we don't talk about a lot, but all of these certifications kind of expand and build upon one another. So, for example, if you're a certified personal trainer, if you get like another specialty certification with an ACE, it counts as your continuing education courses. So not only do you get to count that as part of your continuing education courses, but you get to expand and grow in your field. So a lot of people talk about growing in their field and in their knowledge. So that's one of the ways you can do that is by getting a specialty certification. Kind of like with the RD, you can get a specialty certification within so many things like renal, weight loss, sports dietetics. There's just so many things, oncology that you can do. And so with ACE, I wanted to specialize, but then also at the end of the day, you also need continuing education courses. So what better way to kind of get both at the same time? And then being a certified personal trainer, that helped me with the PT assistant. So, as a physical therapist assistant, you need to have a foundational knowledge in, range of motion, basic anatomy, exercise fundamentals. And so that helped me a lot, with being a physical therapist assistant. And then, being an EKG technician, believe it or not, there's a good chunk of that training where it talks about the basic medical terminology and then also just knowing the anatomy, because you need to know where to put the placement of the EKG leads. So having the background as a personal trainer and as a physical therapist assistant, I mean, that helps you a lot with the placement. And then not to mention, you already have the ability of talking to a client, like we talked about informed consent, where you knock on the door, introduce yourself. You're not like fidgeting with your leads and like worried, stressed out about how you're going to talk about something. You already have that patient care interaction with the other, the other jobs, other positions, experiences that you have. So that all helped. And then obviously as an NDTR, as I mentioned earlier, it just transitions nicely. A lot of the skills that you have as an NDTR, you still carry forward and polish up and do as an RD.
Mark, you are probably one of the smartest people I have featured on this podcast, because I was looking at your all the credentials and I was like, how is this man doing all of this? It just looks like so much extra work and just stress, but the way you're doing it is so intelligent and so smart. It's like you're building on these foundations. Everything you just said makes sense. And again, like the continual education you have to do. And so you're doing it in a way that's going to benefit you and also make you look really good, because you have like, look at these credentials I have or these certifications I have. And I think it's genius. And I think diet technicians and or dietitians listening to this podcast, this is a great way to think about continuing education, of like, let me do some continuing education, but make it worth my time. Because having these extra credentials behind your name or extra certifications when you're looking for jobs, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it makes you stand out more, and it might help you have a better, higher starting pay, because people look for things like this. So that is, where did you learn that? Did you just think through that, or did you like, how did you come up with that idea? Was that a mentor that recommended that to you, or?
So I will say the Holy Spirit. So he's my mentor, and so I really didn't have like anyone, any person mentoring me specifically, but it says in the Bible, many are plans in a man's heart, but it's the Lord who directs your steps. And so for me, I always knew that I wanted to be in the field of nutrition, and then also back in the day, I'll just go back to my college days. I wanted to either major and minor in nutrition and exercise science, whatever it looked like, whether it's nutrition first or exercise science first, which is kind of funny because the master's degree that I'll be getting in December here in a couple of weeks, it's a master's of applied exercise science in sports nutrition. So I was kind of able to combine both of those. But my background was at University of Alabama, food and nutrition. And so I feel like I have a good foundation of kind of both. But, to answer the question again, no one really mentored me. It was just something that I feel like the Holy Spirit, put together. And, I do want to tie in this, because it will be a huge disservice if I do not talk about this. But kind of going off topic, Marie, I lost this ring in the ocean. And so as you can see, I went to the University of Alabama. I'll put it closer.
Uh-huh.
And you can see my shirt roll tide.
Yeah.
But here inside my ring, I have like a Bible verse. It's John 6:35,
Uh-huh.
and so basically paraphrasing, those who seek after me will never hunger or thirst. And so Jesus talking about He's the bread of life, and just it's just really important. Kind of what you're saying is there's a lot of spiritual components into everything, including nutrition. And so, as you know, that Jesus fasted for 40 days. And, it's just one of those things where we talk about intermittent fasting, how it's like a new concept. But at the end of the day, it's really not. It's biblical. It's the first time it ever occurred. It was way back in Jesus' time. He did it himself. So, I always want to tie in, nutrition with spirituality and with my faith. And so going back to the story is I lost this while I was in Florida. So my wife and I, we were at the beach, and my son was there too. And we like to keep our camera just rolling in the background just so we can get footage and, just memories. So we have a stand, and this is just one of the God things that, it's evidence, right? So we talk a lot about anecdotal evidence, which is just like, word of mouth. But then also, like, the saying is like, seeing is believing. So having that camera to back me up, that you can actually see the moment where this ring slips off my finger at the ocean, where I'm dusting like the sand off of my shorts, and it flies off. So it's just a little loose, and especially once you get it wet, it just slips off pretty easy. So needless to say, that's what happened. And I was just frantically looking for my class ring. At that time, I only had it for a year. So I was like, oh my goodness, I really lost my class ring in the ocean. Like, what's the worst that can happen? So that is what happened. And after looking for 15 to 20 minutes, I finally had two thoughts in my head. The first thought was, imagining, just a young child walking by the beach and saying, hey, look, Mom, an Alabama ring. And then he picks it up. And, I was like, okay, if that happens, then that's cool. He'd have a ring. But then another thought that came across my mind was just this sinking to the bottom of the ocean next to like a skull. And I know that's kind of like a morbid thought, but I was just like pretty much thinking like that ring's as good as gone. Um, and so anyways, I wanted my ring back, and, ask not, and, asking you shall receive. And if you don't ask, then you don't know what God's capable of doing, what He's not capable of doing. At the end of the day, all you can do is ask. And if He says no, then He says no. If He says yes, then He says yes. So I asked, and as soon as I stuck my hands out like this, like I was praying, I said, hey, God, I really need my ring back. If it's in your will, please give it to me. And if not, then that's okay. But at least I know. And so as soon as I stuck my hands out, boom, this ring came into my hands. It's not like I saw it and then I had to reach for it. It's not like I felt it and then I had to like fight for it. Nothing like that. It's just boom, I felt it into my hands immediately. And that's wonderful things about God is when He speaks, it's always clear and it's always definite. When it's coming from Him. There was no hesitation of where that came from. So God gave me my ring back, and I truly believe it's because it says in the Bible that God honors those who honor Him. And so because I wanted to dedicate my degree, what I do for Him, I really do believe that's why He gave it to me back. So one of the things is like I don't covet anything in this world, but again, if it's like it says in the Bible, God honors those who honor Him, and whatever you do it for the Lord. And so I do believe because I was honoring Him and I'm trying to be a willing vessel for Him, that God gave me this back. So it sounds like a crazy story, and it is. But one of the coolest thing about this is that it's part of my testimony, and I want it's something that I can actually talk to patients quite easily because people will just randomly ask me, "Oh, hey, that's a cool ring. Where'd you go to school?" And I was at the airport the other day, and someone actually went to Alabama too, and it was just like, "Oh, hey, I noticed your class ring. That's where I went to school too." So it just really it's a really easy conversation starter. Even when you aren't saying anything, people will just notice your class ring, and then you can talk to them about the Lord. So it's just really cool how God worked that out.
That's incredible. And it sounds like faith in Christ is your why. And I know a lot of times talking to people in this profession and just the schooling and the credentials and keeping up the credentials can get really exhausting and make you wonder why you're doing all this work. And so you always have to have your why. And the why that you have is so foundational and so concrete that it's exciting to continue to follow you and seeing how you grow and what you continue to do. And so with that, we'll close out here soon, but I do want to ask about just the next steps. I see here on your website that you're accepted into a Doctorate of Health of Science and also a Doctorate of Occupational Therapy. So what is in the works? What is in your future, Mark? What are the plans that you are looking to pursue now?
So yeah, we kind of alluded to that earlier with like how all of these other licenses and certifications expand on one another. So it's definitely complementary. But at the end of the day, I always knew that that I wanted a terminal degree, and so terminal degree, it's different for every profession. So as a registered dietitian, the terminal degree now, is a master's degree. Like entry level. Like in 2024, that is going to be the required degree for you to become an entry level dietitian. Um, in occupational therapy, you can get either a master's or a doctorate's degree. And so I was in a master's program, and it was just taking me so long because it was a different workload. So I was in a master's program in occupational therapy, and by the time I looked at it, I can get a doctorate's degree in occupational therapy at the same time, but I have to explain a little bit more. So when I was first accepted, I was in a doctorate's program, and that would have taken even longer. And so I was trying to make it a little bit shorter. So I dropped it down to a master's program. But then even then, I didn't feel I knew that it didn't feel like a good fit. And just I don't ever like to talk bad about any schools. So in terms of like the route that I was choosing. I was originally in a doctorate program in occupational therapy, and then just because I wanted to get out in the field just a little bit quicker, I downgraded to a master's program. But then I didn't feel like it was a good fit at that particular program, and so life happened. My father-in-law, we had to take care of him for a time there. He had cancer, and so, it kind of worked out. I withdrew temporarily from the program, took some a leave of absence, if you will. And I explained that to them. And then whenever time came to pursue that again, I was looking at a new program. And this new program, it's just such a much better fit in terms of, my goals and everything. So the time frame, and then also just meeting the staff, asking questions, seeing how it works. And the funny part is I'll be finishing at the same time that I originally would have. So, it couldn't work out any better. I do have something to show for that. I didn't lose totally everything. And another cool thing is the courses that I took for that program carry over into the Doctor of Health Science program. So the Doctor of Health Science program that I got accepted to as well, I was able to bypass several courses because I earned that from my Doctorate of Occupational Therapy program. So that program will only take me 3 semesters to complete. So I'll have a Doctorate of Health Science within 3 semesters, which is a year.
God, just moving and like figuring out the situations because life happens, but that's awesome that you're still that it worked out more in your favor to, sacrifice yourself and take care of family. And the Lord, it sounds like He rewarded you with that. So that is your foundation is solid. Let me just say that. So Mark, let's close out this podcast. Thank you so much for coming. How can people follow you, get in contact with you if they have questions or if they just want to see how you progress in your career?
Yeah, of course. So you can reach out to me. So I have my website, myportionnutrition.com, and then also on Instagram, myportionnutrition. If you want to find me through this podcast, you can probably just reach out to just the comment section, and then I'll try to reach out to you as well there. I try to interact with people as much as I can, be gracious with my time. So there's different ways to reach out to me, and I'll also be cognizant of that too, on the lookout for it.
Yes, and if you do comment on this podcast to talk to Mark, I will send you that message. So we'll make that connection happen for anyone listening who wants to talk to Mark one on one or has a question for him. And then Mark, any with your experience and your career, any advice to NDTRs who are currently listening? What would you say to them?
I would say just to be positive, and just if you're a believer, put your faith in God. He will truly direct your steps and guide you as He did me. So you can never go wrong when you follow Christ. So there's been a lot of people who might say you're all over the place, but if you really look at everything and take the time to see what happened, is the Holy Spirit directs you. He will guide you in a way that doesn't make sense to other people, but at the end of the day, it makes 100% sense because you're following Him. And as you can see, it just worked out every way, as you can imagine. And so, for anyone who has their faith in God, just continue to trust in Him. He's really been my anchor for everything.
That is awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. Everyone, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, comment down below, like, or leave us a review on Spotify so that we can continue to encourage NDTRs and let other individuals and students know about this pathway. And that's all I have for you guys. Thanks for listening or watching.